In our today's world, we are more and more exposed to toxins, endocrine disruptors, things that have not been around 100 years ago and that have potentially or clearly significant impact on our health. Disrupting your hormones, ergo lowering your testosterone, raising estrogen, and create metabolic chaos. In this document, in this list, I'm going to share with you the big bangs that you have to pay attention to that are relatively easy to pay attention to, explain them and what is a better alternative so you can really make sure you're not unnecessarily putting yourself at an elevated risk of finding things such as microplastic that crosses the blood-brain barrier and ends up in your brain, other particles that are just like entering your endocrine system. Endocrine system essentially is your hormonal system. In all these toxins, these particles can end up in your system one way or another and cause chaos, right? So let's get right into it. First and foremost, you should already know, obviously, microwaving food and plastic is a bad idea because the plastic in and of itself will already release a certain amount of microplastic that can also, like I said, cross the blood-brain barrier. But in particular, when you heat it up, you break the plastic even more down and it will end up in your food and ergo ends up in your body. As an alternative, use glass or ceramic containers. Easy fix. Especially pay attention to black plastic containers or black plastic cutlery in that situation. Think about sushi containers, like these black forks that you sometimes have at parties and stuff like that. These are made often from recycled electronic waste. And these electronic devices, they have something in there called flame retardants. Essentially, when one of these devices would have a shortcut or so and would light up, so it doesn't burn down the whole house. But since that's recycled, that's going to be what's ending up then in your recycled plastic. Not a great thing. Buy glass, jar versions instead, right? Also, drinking from plastic bottles, not a good idea because especially the longer it sits in there, and also like if you crack the bottle a little bit around and like all of that, like we all do that a little bit to a degree, it will leach more and more microplastic into your system, and potentially, not the only reason, but it's one of the reasons why we see generational lower levels of testosterone across all men and all age groups. Not a great thing. Alternative, use stainless steel or glass bottles, ideally. Paper coffee cups. Also, your favorite takeaway coffee. And if you have that in one of their cups, yes, they're paper cups, but the thing is they have a plastic lining around it. Means, and especially if you pour hot water or hot liquid into that, these particles, microplastic particles, will go into your coffee and you will ingest them into your body. Bring your own stainless steel and insulated mug. I always, funny enough, I have it here right away. I use blender bottle. I use that for everything. I use that for my protein shakes. I use that when I get a takeaway coffee. I have everything in here. First of all, it stays hotter for longer, so it's actually even better. And you're not exposing yourself to all the microplastics. Canned food also goes in there. Like even though it's canned and it's like either steel or aluminum, the canned foods, they have a plastic lining. So obviously the metal doesn't rust. The plastic lining, and most of these foods, if it's like beans or especially soup, they are being poured hot into the can. And if you pour them hot, they let it sit there, all the microplastics will go into the can, into the food. You ingest it thinking like, oh, I had this nice tomato soup, super healthy. There you go, right? Again here, alternative would be buying glass jar versions. By the way, BPA, BPS are the compounds, the plastics that usually go in there. Also, this is like a little bit, for most people, like less of a concern. Scented candles, air fresheners, colognes with fragrance, because they often use things called phthalates or parabens. And they also, in some studies, suggest hormonal impairment, hormonal disruption coming from them, right? Instead of that, use essential oil diffusers or clean burning beeswax candles. If you use colognes, maybe don't spray them all the time, like directly on your skin. Maybe put them somewhere where they're not in direct touch with your skin directly. What I've seen also, like some people do, but this is more like a hack for making the cologne last for a little bit longer is somebody, they put like Vaseline on their skin, which kind of like puts like an additional protection layer. And if you spray it on top, it sticks for longer. Side tip. Non-stick cookware, Teflon, and PFAS. PFAS are also known as forever chemicals. You can look that up on Google. Forever chemicals. Microplastic will over time go out of our body. But of course, if you keep accumulating it, it gets worse and worse and worse. PFAS, depending on the exact form of PFAS, they can stay in your body 5, 10, up to 20 years. Not a great thing. So especially if you have a lot of non-cook cookware, which I do too, and I had to, unfortunately, fight with myself to like change that and use more stainless steel, cast iron, or ceramic coated pans. So you're not unnecessarily going there. Because the thing is like maybe don't use a plastic fucking, how do you say, like the, like pan thing? I don't know how that's called. Because that obviously is also going to leach some stuff in there. Maybe you have like one of them that actually like has melt a little bit on the side because it got too hot. Not a great idea either. Use wood, use stainless steel, and a pan that is maybe also, if you use these, like the metal ones on a non-stick cookware, like you scratching these PFAS into your food. Very bad thing. Also receipts, crazy as it sounds, receipts are thermal paper and they also are coated with BPA and BPS. And whenever you touch them, like it absorbs through the skin. Of course, you're not going to fall apart if you like once touch a receipt. But if you do that often and very relatively, I never take them. Never, ever. Like I'll just like, I even don't want them unless it's like a electronic warranty or something like that for an electronic device. Just say no and handle it minimally and just throw it away right away. Because like, unfortunately, these poor workers in the store that touch them every 2 seconds, that will have a health impact on them for sure, right? Tap water, too. Even if you're living in Europe, even if you're living in Switzerland, our tap water is not always as clean as it seems. Because the thing is, like, yes, we will see all these reports from, like the sourcing and all of that. That seems great. But the problem is what you get at the source versus what you get actually in the end in your tap are two different things. Because your building also has maybe been built 5 years ago, 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. And these pipes in the past maybe even had lead as their pipes. And they're getting dirty. Like I've actually seen some building reconstruction in the past, and I've seen like when they cut them open, and it's like sorry for my language, but it's fucking disgusting. And you're like, I drink out of that every single day, right? Easy fix to that is, and like on top of that, that's not even like, that's just a disgusting thing. Like on top of that, the problem is with our sanitary system that has been like recycling the water essentially. A lot of females that use the pill for not getting pregnant, they will also release certain hormones. These are steroid hormones back into the water. These are very difficult to filter out of the water, and it ends up back again in the tap water that you're having every single day, including microplastics, also depending on where you live, fluoride, heavy metals, estrogenic compounds, what I just mentioned. What you can do to mitigate that is using a great filter. Reverse osmosis is the gold standard. In one of our apartments in Mexico, we also have reverse osmosis. Berkey is an option too, but look out. The thing is, like, you don't only want to filter out what the majority of them, like quote unquote, filters out, like let's say like the fluoride and whatnot, but you want to have one that has an advanced filtering system that can potentially also filter out hormonal leftovers. Very, very important. Tap water, because the tap water that we have may be not as healthy as we thought. The 9 first ones, we're getting just started. Endocrine disruptors. No, we have the majority of it already, so don't worry. 2 fats, you should know that already, because certain fats that we eat, we have healthy fats, we have like also very unhealthy fats, and these are essentially 2 ones that we have to pay attention to: trans fats and excess saturated fats, right? Trans fats in particular, you find them in baked goods, deep fried food. Think anything that has like very high heated oils, In most situations, these then convert from regular fat, polyunsaturated fat in most cases, to trans fats, and is one of the unhealthiest you can get. And especially, let's say, like fish and chips, or like you have just like chips from the restaurant, French fries. These oils, they are not getting changed every day. They're not. And it's like, again, it's like fucking disgusting. Like sometimes they keep these oils for weeks in some places. Like I've seen that. Because nobody asks, obviously, about that. Nobody goes into the kitchen like, oh, when did you do your last oil change? Like, no. Like, especially if the establishment is just like, something around the corner. Maybe something to pay attention to. That's why generally it's a good idea to not have a lot of fried foods, right? So trans fats, both of them actually, saturated and trans fats, they raise your, so to say, bad cholesterol, the LDL, but they also increase like your low density lipoprotein, anything that is like essentially like bad for your cardiovascular health, inflammation, and everything down the road. Like that's where most metabolic problems start. Type 2 diabetes comes from an excess of, like type 2 diabetes, for example, is insulin resistance. And the problem is, people always think the sugar is the problem because they had too much sugar. No, the sugar is not the problem. The sugar only becomes the problem because you have such an arteriosclerotic buildup in your blood vessels and in your arteries and everything, that the insulin and the sugar that goes through the thing can't go into the cell membrane, into becoming glycogen, essentially, like stored sugar for your muscle, which is a good thing, which is like something that we run on. It can't go in there, so it remains in the blood. And if it remains in the blood, that's why we have a high blood sugar. That's not a good thing. Because if we have too much of these fats, that's what causes the problem. The sugar is only the symptom then, but not the root cause. Very important to understand. Very important to not fall into the trap, right? So avoiding saturated fats primarily coming from like mostly almost all high-fat animal products. Think like fatty beef products, fatty pork products, anything that is animal-based and has a lot of fat content, except salmon, is highly likely to also have like a lot of saturated fat. Eggs is fine as long as you're not eating like 30 eggs a day. You should be fine. Just try to stick with all your protein sources, and if meat, with leaner sources that are of high quality and not like salami, sausages. These are on the whole list some of the worst, right? And then just to like finish off here, everyday talkings to watch out for. Again, it goes back to the original one, storing hot food in plastic containers. Like I said, it leaches the plastic into there. So if you prep your food maybe for the week or something, or if you want to store it for the next day, don't put it, like you can use plastic containers, but don't put it in there hot. Let it cool down first. When it's cooled down and like room temperature or so, put it then in the plastic and then put it in the fridge. Ideally, you want to use glass. Blue light exposure at night, that will also have a massive impact on that, even though it's not a direct chemical, so to say. But blue light exposure at night, you all should know that already, suppresses melatonin, disrupts your circadian rhythm, keeps you more awake than you need to, and you're not able to recover as good as you can. 2 ways to fix it. Either put night shift mode on your desktop and on your phone. And ideally, I don't have them right here now. I actually do. The second pair. The blue light blocking glasses. These are the ugly ones. These are the strong ones that I have. And it's actually also like turning night now right here. These are the ugly ones. These are not the stylish ones, but these are the ones that work. Look like a fashion victim. But when it gets dark, as soon as the sun is down and I still want to get something done on the screen, always with these. Always, always, always. Another one that nobody's talking about, wearing synthetic underwear, tight pants all day. But especially the focus here is on synthetic underwear. We only have animal studies on that one right now, where they gave synthetic underwear to rats. And they discovered that the rats that have been wearing synthetic underwear or synthetic clothing, their sex drive reduced, they had endocrine disrupting processes going on, and just not a lot of good things going for them when it comes to like sexual health. And we don't have human studies in that, but that was, for me at least, already enough to see that I'm like, okay, let me throw out all the polyester underwear, only cotton from here. Recommend that only also to your wife ideally, because obviously it's not only you, but it's the two of you and all of your family, right? Tight underwear all day, that is a little bit more genetic, but like sometimes if you have too tight underwears all day, like it makes it's a little bit more genetically dependent that your testicles get a little bit too warm. But as long as you let them swing out a little bit every now and then, you should be fine. Bamboo or cotton, like I said. And then lastly, cooking or reheating food in aluminum foil, because of course also if you put aluminum too hot, it will start leaching into your food. And especially even more if you use acidic or salty meals, because they degrade the lining of the aluminum more and it will get more into your food. Use parchment paper or glass bakeware instead. With glass you'll be fine, with stainless steel you'll be fine. And as long as you follow these things, you focus on the 20% that will give you 80%, not of the results, but 80% of the possible toxins that you can avoid. Because like I said, it never stops. There are so many things that are not good for our health. But these, all of them are very, very easy to execute without having to over obsess or, become like living like a monk if you do that. Document is attached below. Stay healthy.